Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020. I would like to welcome everyone to the Council as a Whole Committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. Committee members present here this evening. We have everyone present. We have Councilors Walsh, Green, Fleming, Van Hazinga, DiNatale, Zarella, Schultz, Boschman, Squalia, and myself, Councilor Merrick. We also have the finance team and Mary D'Alterete as clerk and City Solicitor Pusateri. We advertised for a public forum this evening. There were no members of the public who came forward to participate in public forum. We have before us this evening several orders, 18120 through 18920, all corresponding to the FY 21 budget that is before us this evening. For the public, what we will do is there have been 4 cuts submitted in advance and proposed to this budget. Those 4 cuts will be addressed line by line. Each councilor who has proposed them will have an opportunity to introduce their cuts, justify them. The finance team, led by Mayor DiNatale and AJ Torignici staff, will be asked to respond to the cuts and their impact, and then the council will have an opportunity to ask further questions of the finance team, deliberate, and we will vote on each of the cuts individually before taking up each of the corresponding orders. With that, we will begin. We have the first item, proposed cut to 18120 is on page 7, councilors, of your packet, City Council expense. Education and travel line item. The original amount was $4,000. The proposed cut was $3,000 for a new proposed amount of $1,000. Councilors, I submitted that cut and it was submitted for 2 reasons. The first and foremost was that particularly this year, given the state of conditions, we certainly do not have widely available professional development opportunities. I expect that we will have maybe some available through Mass Municipal Association in a remote environment, but it's not like it typically is in terms of the breadth and scope of offerings this year. And in a year of many cuts, I'd like to prioritize only our new counselors and giving them the opportunity first and foremost to take advantage of any professional development. And which leads me to my second reason, which is really in a year where we're asking every department and budget area to do more with less and to absorb and operate with cuts. I think we need to learn to do the same, particularly this year. So I think it's important that we live with the same cuts that we're asking everyone else to take. So I want to ensure that we leave this line item intact. And I've already had a conversation with the mayor that when we return to post-COVID times, that we look to bring this this budget item back to present levels that it has been operating at, to ensure that counselors have an opportunity to get education and professional development from peers across the states and from organizations, so that we have formal training. But again, this year, I think it's important that we do a little bit more with less, and that we prioritize our new counselors and their opportunity for professional development over those who have been on the council for some time. So with that, I am both the submitter and the department head. So I will now turn this over to any counselors who wish to add something or ask any further questions. I have Councilor Boschman with a request. Councilor, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm not mute now. I happen to disagree with you. I think that we all can learn, and I don't think we should be cutting that. If there's meetings that we have a chance to go to, we should go. I think we're here to represent the people of Fitchburg and know as much knowledge as we can get out there. And it's a shame that we're using this as a criteria to say, we do our fair share, because we're really, to me, in my personal opinion, I don't think that's a fair share. If you want to do your fair share, we should have cut the $50,000. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Next, we have Councilor Zarella. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly think it's important for all of us to be well educated to do our jobs. However, it's a small cut, all things considered. But realistically, in a year like this, where we're trying to pinch everything we can, and where every year we look over the budget and we say, there really isn't anything to cut. There's nothing to cut. Well, this year, where we're even taking things that we normally wouldn't cut, I think something like this, is it nice for counselors to be able to attend educational opportunities and so forth? Sure, it's helpful. It's good for the council. But is it something that we can't do without for 1 year while we try to get through this pandemic? I really don't think it is. I think that if we're going to be trying to cut across the board and we're going to be telling our constituents that we had to make all these cuts because we just didn't have the money to do these things, we need to start at home first. We need to look at our own budget and be willing to say, is this truly an essential, or is this something that we can do without for a little while? Is this something where we can tighten our belts, maybe not get quite as much benefit out of things as we might otherwise get? I mean, we're asking other departments to cut actual personnel or to cut supplies. We can certainly skip 1 or 2 seminars or conferences over the course of the year. So I will be voting in favor of this cut.
Thank you, Councillor Zarella. Next, we have Councillor Schultz. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Kuchmarek. I'll keep it brief. I'm in favor of this cut. I think we should be doing our part, and I totally agree with the cut, and I'll be voting in favor of it.
With that, I have a motion made by Councillor Di Natale to approve the cut and a second from Councillor Van Hazinga. With that, we'll do a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, for each of these line items, we'll do a roll call vote just to ensure we have an accurate accounting. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. President Kuchmarek.
Yes.
Councillor Boschman.
No.
Councillor Di Natale.
Yes.
Councillor Fleming.
Yes.
Councillor Green.
Yes.
Councillor Schultz.
Yes.
Councillor Squalia.
No.
Councillor Van Hazinga.
Yes.
Councillor Walsh.
Yes.
Councillor Zarella.
Yes.
That is 8-2.
8-2. Madam Clerk, did we miss someone through internet connectivity?
Councillor Kuchar's not here.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Squally. I appreciate it. Next, we have cut number 2 submitted by Councillor Boschman. This is on page 12, councillors. Accessory expense, contract services line item. The original amount was $127,000. Proposed reduction was in its entirety to a new amount of $0. Councillor Boschman, the cut is yours.
I propose this cut. I believe the job should be in-house. I always felt that. I never see that company in here. And I got a question for the financial team. How many times has Chris gone down to their office and talked to him about the assessor's work? And why is he going down there?
Councillor, I'll turn the floor back to them, but if you have anything further to add, I'd ask you to add it now and then ask them to address that question.
I don't really think we're saving any money. I think we need the job here at home. I think people need the personal touch that they're not getting, and their questions answered, and we can't get them answered. So that's how I feel. And if they feel, it looks like that that job there at $127,000, when I was looking at the website, their website, they take care of many, many towns and that. So this must be a part-time position with all the towns that they're taking over. So why are we paying $127,000 for a part-time position that I look at it? That's it.
With that, I'll give the finance team an opportunity to respond.
Okay, Mayor. You'll forgive us, councilors, we had to unmute.
Of course, no problem.
Well, this is becoming an annual extravaganza. Councilor Boschman, thank you so much for bringing this up yet again. And we will do our best to explain that RRG is doing a good job. They're dealing with exemptions, abatements, reevaluations, appellate tax board cases, TIFs and ties, and much more. If we were to hire an employee, it would be costing us much more than we're paying right now when you consider OPEB and unfunded liability. So, and also none the least of which is my choice as mayor that I wanted to privatize this, contracted it out, and that's what it is, a contracted service. We believe we're getting a bang for our buck. I don't know what you're basing your statement about people not having a personal touch. I'm not sure what that means, but be that as it may, we believe the city is being provided with a good service.
We have councilors Di Natale. You have the floor first.
Thank you. As was just stated, I believe this is the third time now that we have talked about this. First time was when the privatization move was made. Second time was last year, June of 2019. Councilor Boschman put this forward for a reduction again, and it was shot down 9-2. So unless there's something that has changed in the last 2 years, I don't understand why we're doing this a third time either. The mayor is the chief executive officer of the city, and the assessor's department reports to him. Considering the fact this is a contracted service, if they are not performing the duties under their contract, then we can easily get rid of them. Don't have to deal with the unions, don't have to deal with collective bargaining or anything. Now, it was said earlier that the quote from the council was, I don't think we're saving that any money. Well, that's not congruent with the facts, as the auditor pointed out 2 weeks ago, because I asked the direct question. When you have a full-time person versus a contractor, every time you look, it's less costly. Now, why did we do this? We did not do this because it's less costly. We did it because the chief assessor retired without much notice. It was kind of a surprise. Retired, left us hanging for a couple of months after that, and they decided to go in this route. And I'm pretty confident, knowing the auditor, the mayor, the chief of staff, that if this place was not doing what they need to do, then they would switch, irrespective of the cost. But that's not the case, and it is least costly. Now, if this were to get reduced, it's staying with the assessor's office. It's not going to go to pay for some other reduction in staff. So I'm voting against this because I have yet to see anything tangible that is impacting our assessors' services. And this is the third time we're debating this. I don't know how many more times we're going to talk about the same thing. Maybe if it was a 6-5 vote or a 7, it's been 9-2 or 10-1. I don't understand it. But and the same justification just provided was the same justification last year and the year before that. So nothing has changed here. So I am voting against this, and I'm sticking with what we're doing. Thank you.
Councilor Green has the floor next.
Okay, thank you, but it did look like Anthony wanted to speak.
I apologize, Councilor Zarella. I jumped you in the order. Councilor Green, we'll go back to you. Councilor Zarella, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilor Green. So first of all, I'm not going to rehash. Yes, we are saving money. I'd like to also note that to the best of my recollection, back when we first underwent this privatization, part of the reason for it was because there was a severe shortage of qualified chief assessors in the state. I remember we had facts presented to us by the mayor's team demonstrating that there were numerous cities and towns around the Commonwealth attempting and failing to hire chief assessors, which also means the salary would have been higher. If we had had to negotiate a new salary in that job market, that would be very much an employee's market, so to speak. I'd also like to note that if we were hypothetically to take this cut and hire a new chief assessor, that person couldn't be hired for several months still. There's a process that it would take. And so it would be incumbent, I feel, upon anyone who wishes to make this cut to, rather than cutting it to zero, figure out how much money we would need to leave in the line item to continue the contract services until they can be picked up by a new hire. And I point that out only to point out that when we're considering tweaking the budget, we need to actually be thinking through how the money is moving around, not simply deciding which line items we don't like and slashing them. I know that my colleague knows that I respect his opinions and that anytime we clash, it's always with a sense of respect. But I do feel that in this instance, this cut is neither advisable based on the facts, nor well presented in terms of the steps we would need to take to make it effective in the way that has been suggested. So I will be voting against this cut.
Councilor Green. have the
Thank
floor.
you. Thank you. I would just like to hear if we've got the city solicitor attorney with us, that how much it would cost the law department if we gave up all the other legality work that this chief assessor is doing. I mean, it's amazing to me that we keep debating this particular line item only because this isn't a local company or it's not, one person doing the job. I believe for all the work that this company is doing, we probably couldn't afford to have the amount of employees to do, as city employees, to do the work that this company is doing. This is what this company does. This is their job, is that they do this. They know this job. They know what they're supposed to do. And I can't help but think for a minute that if there was any discrepancy on their job performance, we would be on it. I don't have any doubt about that. So I'm not in favor of eliminating this position, and I won't be. Thank you.
With that, I have a motion made by Councilor Walsh to reject the cut, the second cut made by Councilor Boschman, and I have a second, multiple seconds from Councilors Van Hazinga and Fleming. With that, I'll ask for a roll call vote. This would be to deny the second cut of contract services from the assessor's budget in the amount of $127,000. Madam Clerk.
President Kushmarek,
Yes.
Councilor Boschman,
That's a big no.
Councilor Di Natale. We may have lost him. Councilor Di Natale,
No against the cut.
Yes.
So it's a yes vote.
Yes.
Yes vote.
And Councilors, I'll ask in the future, we want to do this in the affirmative, so it's a yes or no vote, but for the time being, we'll continue. So
I had to step out for a minute. Was this to give leave to withdraw or to accept?
this is to give leave to withdraw.
All right, then I'm a yes.
Thank you. Counselor Fleming,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Schultz,
Yes.
Counselor Squalia,
Yay.
Counselor Van Hazinga,
Yes.
Counselor Walsh,
You're muted, Councilor.
yes. Thank you. Counselor Zarella,
Yes.
that is 9-1.
Next, we have, and again, Councilors, so whether or not you plan to vote in favor of, I just ask that we, after each cut is presented, whether or not you plan to vote for it, you make a motion in the affirmative, just to make it a little bit more clear on the cuts that are before us. Next, we have a cut made by Councilor Boschman on page 27, Facilities Management, Personal Services. Line item Director of Facilities, original amount $90,000, proposed reduction of $90,000, or proposed new amount of $0. Councilor Boschman, the floor is yours.
You know, councilors, I feel like I'm Dr. Fusi here. The difference between him and I is that he's a doctor and I'm just a counselor. I put in this cut because here we are, we're telling departments that we're cutting departments or we're not hiring replacements. I can't, and you can't sell Fitchburg if we're presenting potholes in our city streets. I can't, and you can't sell Fitchburg if we can't see around the corner because of overgrowth. I can't, and you can't sell Fitchburg if we don't replace the two policemen because crime's going to go up, and that's a bad thing. Now, the mayor and the financials team is telling us we're going through hard times. So they want to hire a facilitator for what? To tell us that we got problems? Don't the residents know we got problems? They can't even go to work. I told you 2 weeks ago, I was on my way to Leominster, Mass at 6:15, and the guy's front end was on the ground. The tire, he couldn't go to work because our roads are terrible. And I understand we only get $1.2 million, but we can fix the potholes, and we're not even doing that because we don't have enough employees. So we're going to go and say to the guy, let's make our dream list, write it down, make it there. We'll present it to the financial team, and we'll come up with the money when we're not even replacing people on the DPW or the police department, which, by the way, people, sells Fitchburg. This guy is not going to sell Fitchburg. He's going to make a dream list, and he's going to get told, just like we get told all the time, we don't have the money, Paul. You don't understand. We don't have the money. So why are we putting this in when we could have put in 2 DPW people or bring back the police department? I had a friend that went to Auburn, Mass. A couple of years ago. He told me this. He said he overheard people saying, go to Fitchburg because they don't have enough policemen and we can do our crimes out there. Really? Really? And that's a true story. So I'm not in favor of this position. I think we should not vote for it. We don't have adequate protection. We don't have adequate DPW people. And our roads are terrible. Our sidewalks are terrible. The overgrowth's terrible. And we're going to put this in, have a dream list. Is that what we want? A dream list? That's all I feel about it. I'm not in favor of it.
Finance team, give you a chance to respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Boschman. I believe back in March, back in March, we had a similar discussion. What the councilor fails to mention is some of the projects that this individual is going to be overseeing and the training that's going to be required. So let me just elucidate everyone as to what that's going to be. Library hazardous material removal, Putnam Street garage upgrades, Main Street garage upgrades, police department, women's locker room, South Street boiler and roof replacement, LED conversion of the high school, Longshore Memorial, and of course, commissioning of City Hall. These are some of the trainings that this individual is going to be responsible to have knowledge of and to impart that on the people that work under that individual. In this particular case, one person, but also the school department facilities director. They will work in tandem. Overhead coiling doors, fire shutter, operable partition, electric traction elevator. Mind you, folks, these are trainings. This guy needs to know, or gal needs to know how these things work. All right, fire protection, plumbing, mechanical, hydrostatic test and chemical treatment, condensing type boiler, building automation system, electric lighting controls, fire alarm system, firefighter communication system, elevator lobby communication system, access control, gutter heat trace cables, telecommunications, planting, irrigation, lawns, grasses, and plants. Now, you know who does that today, folks? He's sitting next to me. And Mary Delaney across the hall. That's who does that. That's not part of their job. Although they do an outstanding, they make a great effort at delivering on that. That's why we need this. None the least of which, folks, and we brought this up back in March, I brought it up, the city has proactively been working with our insurance carriers to work on our loss prevention efforts. We all know how wonderful we are with maintaining our buildings. That's why this job is necessary. It's crucial that the city continue a trend for the next 2 years to have minimal claims, allowing us to build a credible portfolio to go back to the marketplace. Best practices, continued investment in capital, and a position to oversee this progress is necessary if the city is to achieve this goal. Now, I think that probably says it all. We've needed this position for a long time. All right? It's not fluff. It's necessary. It's necessary. And I hope you'll see that through and vote accordingly. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I have various counselors looking to speak. I'll just say, I think first and foremost, this is a false characterization to say that by hiring a facilities maintenance director, that you're making the city less safe. And I don't think we're choosing between public safety and our critical infrastructure throughout our city. I think that's a unfair characterization of this scenario. And I would also say that, you know, the mayor just ran through the number of responsibilities, but this is also about a portfolio of buildings. You know, folks say it often, and Councilor Di Natale says it often, that we're often the worst landlord in the city. And I think that's often true. Keep in mind that this person will be responsible for City Hall, a new legislative building, a library, a senior center, working in conjunction with the school department across all of their buildings, the DPW building, the various garages in our city and in our downtown, the police station, 3 fire stations. That's a lot of critical infrastructure. And you think about most college campuses or most companies that have that number of buildings, they have staffs, entire departments comprised of folks that are dedicated and trained in this field. The reality is that if you don't make an investment and look at the long term of investing in our infrastructure, you end up paying more in the long run. Sure, we would save ourselves $90,000 this year and maybe $90,000 next year, but we would ultimately end up paying for costs that would not have otherwise arisen had we identified them early and corrected them through preventative maintenance. Fitchburg State has done an incredible job. They were able to remedy nearly 3 decades of deferred maintenance and costs at the cost of many millions of dollars. The reason that Fitchburg State looks great is because they've had to spend so much money to repair the damage that was done in the 80s and 90s that were left unmaintained and unaddressed. And today they invest in the future by saying, we'd rather spend the money now If there's something broken, we'd rather identify it today instead of waiting for a wall to structurally fail when we could have done a minor correction. And I'll remind you that we are often in this situation as a city. We've talked about City Hall, we've talked about facilities people. We are in this situation because a truss failed in the roof of our City Hall. Had we had a position like this one, we would have identified at the early warning signs before City Hall had to be vacated. The cost of City Hall now, the cost and the price tag that it is today, is merely a direct result of our inaction when the crisis and the issue first arose. Had we addressed it then, we wouldn't be paying nearly as much for it now, if at all. So I would remind folks that we need to spend a little bit today in order to save a lot in long-term costs. And I think that's exactly what this position is doing. I think the mayor is wise in thinking long-term about our critical infrastructure, protecting the investments that our taxpayers have made in the infrastructure that we have across our city. With that, I have Councillor Fleming. The floor is yours.
Yes, hi. First, I want to echo what the mayor and what President Kushmarek said. I also want to just make a comment about a comment that was made by Councillor Bushman about the potholes not selling the city. I understand we have an issue with potholes, but compound the potholes with dilapidated buildings, and then you're really not going to sell the city. I believe that this position requires a lot of knowledge and expertise, and to have someone come in to take over these buildings at $90,000 a year, trust me when I tell you that it is a bargain to have somebody in there doing that for $90,000. I know people who do this position, and it's not an easy job. It requires a lot. So I will vote against this cut. And that's all I need to say.
Also joining us is Councillor Kuchar. Next, we have Councillor Zarella. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with what's been said so far. I'd like to just toss out a few numbers here. I'm going to steal a little bit of Marcus's thunder there. So police officers, if we look at the line item on page 21 for patrol officers, we currently have 59 officers budgeted for FY21 at approximately $3.5 million. 3.6, sorry. Works out to roughly 60,000 per officer. So this 90,000 would not put 2 police officers back on the payroll. It would put 1 and a half, but I'm not really sure what good a half officer does to Chief Martineau. This 90,000 would pave less than 20% of a mile. And if we had had this position for the past 8 years, we would have paid a cumulative total of $720,000. And that's assuming that we don't adjust backwards for inflation, because realistically, we wouldn't have been paying the same $90,000 8 years ago. $720,000, and that would have saved us $23 million if we had had this position back in 2012. So that alone, I think, proves the value of the position. But going forward, and this is, again, a conversation we had at the beginning of the year, this is not a position whose job is simply to walk through buildings, point out problems, and make a punch list. This is someone whose job it is to keep running tabs on all the maintenance, not just in terms of walk through and look at stuff, but in terms of making plans for proactive maintenance ongoing. You know, things like, we need to redo this thing once every 5 years. So let's plan for it in advance so that we've got got the money put away for it. It's things like making plans to make sure that we are prepared for extreme cold weather events like we had in the schools a few years back. If we had had someone whose job it was to proactively plan for events like that, we wouldn't have had those pipe bursts because there would have been some kind of plan in place. For example, when school is not in session, someone does a walkthrough every 24 hours when the temperature is below 30 degrees or something. That's the kind of thing that in hindsight, I can look at it and I can come up with an idea that would have solved it. But that's because I already know that the problem happened and I'm solving backwards for it. This person, among other things, would be responsible for thinking of the problems that haven't happened yet and making sure that they don't. Ultimately, I don't think it is at all an exaggeration to say that if we compare the cost of funding this position with the amount of money we will save through preventative maintenance and through insurance savings and so forth, this line item is actually going to work out to be a net positive to the city budget. The amount of money we're going to save from this position is going to be considerably greater than $90,000. But yes, even though this is a lean year, we have to start now, because if the next issue that comes up, the next failure of a building, the next maintenance task that's been deferred for too long, if it comes to bite us next year, how are we going to handle that coming off of this year? We need someone to get out ahead of it, starting now. And the more money we can save on that in the next 5 years or so, the better we recover from 2020, which is the task that's facing pretty much everyone in America right now, is how do we recover from 2020? So I will definitely be opposing this cut. I think this is one of the smartest new line items we've had in my tenure on the council. Thank you.
Next, we have Councillor Van Hazinga. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. As a city, we have a lot of public buildings, and our president mentioned a few of them, but they altogether would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to replace. And a lot of them are older, a lot of them need substantial reinvestment, and a lot of them need to be replaced. But as a city, we're limited to how much we can borrow to pay for it. So therefore, we need to make sure our public buildings last as long as possible, and we are as smart as possible in maintaining them, in operating them, and reinvesting in them. And the fact that we don't have someone whose job it is to oversee this is irresponsible and incredibly short-sighted. That if we want to make the most of our taxpayers' dollars, we have to have a plan. We have to have someone managing the long-term operation, maintenance, and reinvestment in these properties. I think this is a very needed position that's incredibly overdue. Thank you.
Next, we have Councillor Di Natale. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So in March of 2020, before we were shut down, we had this same exact discussion. My concern is that those who were against this position 7 months ago are now using it as a convenient scapegoat to say to the public that we prefer this position to police, fire, and DPW workers. That's the game here. You just heard it earlier. I feel like every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks or every month, I have to hear one of us talk about this city in ill terms. And referencing it as it was 2 weeks ago, as it looks like hell, direct quote, doesn't look like hell. But unfortunately, there is a subsect of people in this city who are not pleased no matter what we say. They're not pleased about the facts. They don't care what things cost. They listen to a couple of us and they think that that's really what's going on here. That you can take a position for $90,000 and say, see, we're not hiring a DPW worker. By the way, before these cuts were made, the complaints that were stated earlier were the same complaints I've heard from him for the last 6 years. So these cuts aren't going to change anything then in his world. What's never talked about is how do you pay for these things? Never discussed. Why is that? Because it's easy to complain. It's easy to make people angry. It's easy to make the rest of us look like we don't care instead of putting up solutions. I know people are tired of me saying this, but I don't really care because this is what I have to hear every 2 weeks. No solutions, none. And there's a reason for that. So when we had this discussion in March, I remember I said in that meeting that some people like to use boogeymen in the budget to say that we can't do any of these things because of this. Forget that the roads cost $100 million or $9 million a year. Forget that potholes are getting done. If we had more people, more would get done, obviously. This position does not impact that because the problem goes far deeper than this. But this is a convenient scapegoat. Now, I'm sorry, folks. I'm sick and tired of sitting here and listening to our city be trashed about how it looks. We have issues, yes, but there are funding limitations to why we have those issues continuously. That some of us who have the same access to the information ignore it and just keep saying the city looks like hell. I've had it. So Councilor Zarella went through chapter and verse about the cost efficiencies. There was a comment made in the March meeting that this person is going to be some angelic figure that's going to take care of everything. No one ever said that. And with all due respect, anyone who holds the position that the Ward 2 councilor has didn't read the job description. Because the job description is not what he said it is. It's, I want to say 3, 4, 5 pages long. It is extensive. And we all acknowledged back in March that if this person did 30 or 40% of that list, it's a gain over what we're doing now, which is Zippo. So the same people who complain about this are the first ones in line to say our buildings look terrible. And don't forget that, because they don't want the solution. They want to keep complaining about it. This is not a cure-all. This is something we've long needed to do. I was on the council when Mayor Wong was here. She wanted this position bad and never got around to doing it because we had the DOR breathing down our neck. Every private sector company you go to has a facilities management division, and they will tell you how extensive that job is too. So this is about being proactive. This is about planning. This is about trying to mitigate our risks, trying to alleviate issues amongst other departments. This is not duplicative. This is not wasteful. And again, we already voted on this 7 months ago. Forget the pandemic. The reasons for the position were irrespective of the pandemic. So if this position were paying the same amount of money as it would to bring back every single employee in the city of Fitchburg who either got laid off or is not being filled, I could say you're making a good argument. You're going to get back one position, maybe two, if you don't do this. And that's if the mayor does that. And I'm willing to wager, based on my years of experience, he's not going to do that. You know what he's going to do? He's going to drop the tax levy because he's not going to pick one of the 15 or 20 positions that are gone he's going to fill, because I'm sure the unions would love that. Again, I'm against this for a multitude of reasons, but every 2 weeks, folks, I have to hear how terrible this city is and how it looks, and how if we didn't do this, everything would be magically cured. Every 2 weeks, I got to hear this. And you never hear what the solution is. Never. Don't forget that. Thank you.
Next, I have Councilor Schultz.
I think we got Councilor Boschman before me, Councilor Kushmeric.
Councilor Boschman had the first chance to speak on this.
Okay.
So he will certainly have a chance, but you are next on the list.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to say that I'm against this cut. I voted in favor of the position back in March. I think it's been needed. Councilor Di Natale mentioned during Mayor Wong's administration, but I think we could go back 50 years, I think, in the city of Fitchburg when we had the head of the building department in charge of all the buildings, and it was too much for that person. And they just said, well, the school department, you're on your own for maintaining your buildings, and the rest of it will just, if a problem comes up, we'll just try to remedy it. But I agree with the mayor. We need this position. We need to be proactive. It's going to save us money in the end to make sure that our buildings are in top-notch condition. So it's been needed for many, many years, and I totally agree with what the mayor said about that. Thank you.
Next, I have Councilor Green.
Thank you. I want to make a couple of points. One being, I think that it is our duty and responsibility as city councilors and local elected officials that we are the cheerleaders of Fitchburg. So I really do kind of take offense to the fact that, and again, Paul, this is nothing personal, but damn, I don't want to hear every 2 weeks. I don't want to hear every week about how bad the city looks or how poorly we're doing. I would much rather spend my focus and attention on the stuff that we're doing well. And I know that it is difficult to see sometimes. I know that you have a hard time peeking through the rose-colored glasses to see that. I'm not living in a fantasy world. I know that we have issues, but I do feel personally obligated to be a cheerleader for this city and steer people in the right direction of how much positivity we have moving forward. I mean, that's our goal, is to move Fitchburg forward, not to regress, move Fitchburg forward. And if there was somebody, I'm a private, independent building owner. If I had or could afford a facilities manager, I would do that in a heartbeat. I mean, I don't like doing some of the jobs that I have to do to keep my building maintained, nor do I want to, continue to use the skills free of charge that Brian has to offer with his job as well. But I do want to also point out that whatever this dream list is going to consist of, that we have the money set aside to do the projects that are going to be staring us in the face from this dream list on what needs to be done to keep our buildings from continuing to dilapidate or wither away. I mean, this is a needed position. It's been needed, oh my God, probably before Mayor Wong's position, so, or her tenure. So I, want to vote in favor of keeping this position. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, I'm sure, I would like to think that we would have that position hired and there would be somebody in that position already. Because what I don't want to ever see or hear again is Joan Goodwin, the director of the senior center, having to be the general manager of some of the projects that have to be done at the senior center. That's not in her job description at all. That's not in her wheelhouse of having the knowledge to do that. And right now, I mean, she relies on AJ and Mary Delaney to lead her in the right direction. I would love for her to be able to pick up the phone and call one person to say, I'm having a problem here. Can you come and lend your expertise on what I need to do to get it done? So I will not be voting to cut this position. Thank you.
Next, we have Councillor Walsh speaking for the first time, and I know I have a couple more councillors looking to speak for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to touch on a few things that Councillor Green has just mentioned, and I think that this position, as city councilors, I think we need to look forward and we need to prepare for the future. And I think that what this position is going to do is to put us in a position so that we can see things coming down the road and prepare for them. And again, I think Councillor Green, you mentioned expertise. Again, this person is going to have the expertise that although the people currently doing this job are doing everything that they possibly can, it's not in their job description to do everything in the city. This job is going to be focused on the buildings in the city and to look ahead, to see what problems are coming down the road and see if we can prevent them from occurring before we have to go back and fix them in hindsight. So I will be voting against this cut. Thank you.
Next, we have Councillor Boschman speaking for the second time.
I want to say something. I want to make it very, very clear. I'm not Mr. Negative. And yes, I voted against it the first time around, and I have a right, because I'm representing the people of Fitchburg, to vote against it again and to put it on to cut that position. That's number one. Number two, let's get this straight. City Hall, the old City Hall, they knew about that roof a long time ago, and the only reason why they never did it is because they didn't have the word M-O-N-E-Y, money. Now, if you look at the school system, if I'm not mistaken, they used a different word. They used to have a facilitator at the school. And a lot of the project that they wanted done, the same thing goes again. The name of the game is M-O-N-E-Y, money. And when you don't have money, you can't do things. When crime goes up, Pittsburgh doesn't look good. So don't tell me it does. Don't tell me if you have a dirty city, it's going to look good. Don't tell me all that, and don't tell the people of Snowball out there, because they tell me. I don't make it up. They call me up, and they tell me what it looks like when I hear you talk. Don't tell me when I see us spend $150,000 on Water Street that has no bearing on the neighborhood, and we're making it better? Come on. Who are we making it better for? Come on. So don't tell me that I'm doing it for this and that, and I'm Mr. Negative. I talk very positive about Fitchburg. Very positive. You just don't like to hear it. You want to make cuts, let's make cuts. I wanted to make bigger cuts. But you know what? You guys are afraid to make the cuts. So don't tell me. I don't see no progress. Tell me the progress. Yeah. All right, that's it.
Councillor Di Natale, the floor is yours.
So I had to speak again because apparently Councilor Boschman did not read the last 3 years of the annual police report. I'm sure Chief Martineau listening in would love to hear that crime is up in the city when actually it's at record lows right now. Just a little picky fact that might upset some people. And once again, if there were all these cuts that none of us are prepared to make politically, but Councilor Boschman has all of them in his mind, why aren't they on the page? Because he's not going to put them forward either. That's the dirty little secret. So here's what we're doing here.
Okay.
Councillor, before we continue, what I don't want to do, and this is not picking on you, Councillor Di Natale. This is brought up a few more times. We can address points that each other make, but I just want to make sure that we're not addressing each other.
Fair enough, Councillor. I would like to say that if there is nothing stopping any of us from putting cuts on the table, put them on the table. They weren't put on the table, and there's a reason for that. Okay, and I was on the council in 2008, 9, 10, 11, before we evacuated City Hall, and that's not why the roof didn't get fixed. You know why the roof didn't get fixed? Because there was a small problem in the truss in 2001 that the then mayor and city council ignored when they were told, because they didn't have any free cash. They didn't have any stabilization. We talk about money. Well, when you're managing a city properly, the money is there to take care of routine maintenance. So let's be factual here. It wasn't that it cost $1 million and they couldn't fix it. It was a tiny problem that got into a big problem because no one was paying attention to it. And oh, by the way, it doesn't help when you have a junk bond rating status. So again, no solutions, no cuts on the table. The constituents that I talk to, and I know that a councilor mentioned, Mr. President, he represents the whole city. No, he doesn't. He represents Ward 2. I represent the whole city. And the whole city doesn't think where they live is hell. So they understand, like most of us, that there are limitations to things that everyone wants. I said it 2 weeks ago. We announced our fall paving list. The comment isn't anymore, we don't pave roads. It's, why aren't these roads getting done? You're never going to satisfy people. Never going to happen. Because we don't live in utopia. I'm hearing next door is, but they have their own problems. So shockingly enough for some. So let's just understand that the problems we've had in the city, Councilor Van Huizing has said it, have been prevalent for decades. And no one has said once at all that this person is going to fix everything. If you read the job description and listen to the justification, you will understand why this position is being put forward. And it has absolutely nothing to do with what was just said earlier. Nothing. And I hope the majority of residents understand that. I'm pretty sure that they do, because they know, like most of us, money doesn't come on trees. Thank you.
Next, we have Councilor Zarella.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to note that the Councilor Boschman is correct that in 2012, we did not, or at least I assume he is correct, that we did not have the money at that point in time to fix the City Hall project problem rather than evacuating it. That's because the whole concept that we're discussing here is not, again, is not simply identifying an existing problem and saying, here's a list of problems we need to fix. It's saying, here's a list of things we're going to need to spend on in the future. And here's a plan for how we can start putting money away for that eventuality. So no, having someone in this position wouldn't have magically made money appear so that we could fix the already failed truss in 2012. What it may have done is set up a plan in, say, 2008 to say, by 2011 or 2012, this is going to fail if we haven't fixed it by then. Here's what we're going to do about that to make sure that doesn't happen. That is the advantage here. It's not, again, it's not just putting together a dream list of things that need to be done. It's about making plans, making forward-looking plans so that we're not constantly reacting, so that we're not constantly saying, here is a problem we need to fix now because it's already an issue. It's so that we can say, here are the problems we're going to prevent from ever happening. Here are the problems we can foresee that are now not going to be an issue for the council that comes 8 years after us, because we already handled it. That's what this position is all about. It's so that the us, whoever is us in 10, 15, 20 years, is going to look at some of these things and say, oh, here's an expense we need to make. Let's just vote the appropriation from this fund that the council set aside 5 years ago in anticipation of needing to spend this money. Because we already knew we were going to need to, because this person whose entire job is to know everything about our buildings told us that we were going to need this money within 5 years. It's about not being on the back foot anymore. It's about not playing catch up anymore. It's about not having the next freshman counselors being put into the same position that myself and my 3 colleagues from the same class were put into, of having our first term entirely defined by trying to fix problems that we inherited from a decade ago. So that's why we need this position. And that's why I will not be voting to cut it this year or next year or the following year until and unless there is a demonstrated failure of the position to do what we need it to do. Thank you.
With that, I have a motion motion made by Councilor Green and a second by Councilor Walsh to give the third cuts to the Facilities Maintenance Personal Services Director of Facilities position a leave to withdraw. We'll do this by roll call vote. Madam Clerk. You're muted.
Sorry, President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Counselor Boishman,
No.
Counselor Kucher.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Di Natale,
Yes.
Counselor Fleming,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Schultz,
Yes.
Counselor Squalia,
No.
Counselor Van Hazinga,
Yes.
Counselor Walsh,
Yes.
Counselor Zarella.
Yes.
That is 8-2.
8-2. Motion carries. Next, we have our fourth and
I
final.
apologize.
President, was that 90?
I'm sorry, it's 9-2. I do apologize.
9-2. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion carries. And next we have the fourth and final cut submitted by Counselor Boishman, page 27, facilities maintenance, personal services, City Hall custodian line item. Original amount $40,000, proposed reduction $40,000 for a new proposed amount of $0. Counselor Boishman, the floor is yours. Counselor Boishman.
It says 44,000, not 40. On page 27, it says 44,000, not 40.
Okay.
I propose this cut because I talked about it already once, and I'll say it again. Nobody knows when this pandemic's going to get over. Nobody has any clue. We don't even know when the library or the senior center or anywhere else is going to start taking a lot of people in. So I can't see supporting this right now at this present time. And if we open City Hall in January, like the mayor thinks we are, then I believe that the custodians that we have that don't have a lot of work can walk over to City Hall every 4 hours and clean it. 4 hours one guy, 4 hours another. And that's why I proposed the cut. I'm not, there's only so many times you can clean the toilet bowl in a building if they get no people in it. Unless they're gold and you're trying to make them shine. So that's how come I feel that that position should be cut right now at this present time until things turn around. That's it. That's the
Next, I'll
reason-
ask our finance team to respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Boishman. Oh, mask. Let's keep in mind, folks, that we're talking about in excess of 40,000 square feet. We're not just talking about City Hall, we're talking about the legislative building as well. So to split people's time up, when you consider what's required, if you're a day-to-day custodian, it would be unreasonable. As a matter of fact, the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, national organization, states that a building of those buildings with 40,000 plus square feet, you could really make it two people. All right, so we're asking for one, and we believe that we can maintain because the buildings are new. But again, we don't want to fall into that same trap that we've created over and over and over again. We neglect our buildings. I understand Councilor Boishman's point about the pandemic, and some of these custodians they don't have a great deal to do. But we really need to focus on those two buildings. We need to have someone dedicated just to those facilities to make sure that they're going to stay in the condition that they're going to be in January when we open up. Thank you.
First, I have councilors, excuse me, we have Councilor Green looking to speak first. Councilor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And again, I do have to laugh and find it kind of comical, I guess, at this point that we have a particular counselor who likes to point out all the negative sorry, Paul, and talk about how buildings
Yeah.
aren't being maintained.
Counselors, I ask you, we speak to the merits of the item that's before us. Please do not address each other. I just want to make sure that the focus and the emphasis tonight be placed on the merits of cuts or the budget itself. Councilor Green, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And again, I will apologize for that. But buildings don't clean themselves. Bathrooms don't clean themselves. And you would think that even the term custodian means that they are the caretaker of the building. So to eliminate a position seems far-fetched that we would want to do that. I mean, do you expect people when they go into the new city hall to clean up after themselves, or that things aren't going to need to be pointed out and repaired or picked up? It seems far-fetched. So I will agree to the motion to withdraw. I will not be voting for this cut. Thank you.
Next, I have Councilor Van Hazinga. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Councilor Green put it well when she mentioned that, buildings don't clean themselves, toilets don't clean themselves. This is a needed position. And if we're going to invest $23 million in these buildings and then immediately allow them to deteriorate and not take care of them, I just don't understand that. And this is something that's not going to start till the start of the year when we start to move into the property. And that's a time when we're going to need a lot of extra work because there is a lot of commotion. There's a lot of mess associated with moving into a building. That we're going to need someone right away to start taking care of it. And they'll have plenty to do. And in a time of a pandemic, we need someone who's regularly in charge of sanitizing high-touch surfaces, taking care of things. This is a time where we need to be cleaner, not dirtier. And I don't understand the desire to immediately start flushing $23 million down the drain by not taking care of our investment. Thank you.
Councilor Zarella.
Thank you. First, I'd just like to ask a couple clarifying questions to the finance team, so I make sure that I'm not, talking out of my hat here. Would I be correct in understanding that this position is responsible not only for cleaning in the sense of sweeping, mopping, dusting, but also minor maintenance tasks, spackling, whatever, things like that?
Counselor, that would be correct, yes.
Oh, and also, Counselor, probably something I left out. We need, when we have council meetings in those buildings, you're going to need someone there that's going to unlock and lock the facility and make sure it's secure at the close of council meetings. So we're going to have someone with flexible hours that's going to work for us. So yeah, it really is a key position, I believe.
Thank you. And one further question. The current custodial staff that we have for various city buildings, are their contracts and job positions or job descriptions rather generalized or specific to the facilities that they are assigned to?
It's both. The cleaning aspects of it are generalized, but they are assigned to particular buildings. Now, with that said, I will say that in times of need and whatnot, custodians are more than willing to throw in a helping hand if someone had a family issue, what have you. But they are assigned to particular buildings.
That's governed by collective bargaining.
And it's also governed. Thank you, Mr. Auditor. It's also governed by their CBA, collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you. That's what I thought. I'm certain they are more than willing to help us out when we need a hand. Certainly, I don't mean to imply anything at all negative about their willingness. However, the point that I was going to make, and I wanted to make sure I was correct first, is that our custodial staff is not a fungible resource. We can't just take 3 hours of labor out of this building and move it over to this other one. That's not the way that it works. That's not the way the contracts work. That's not the way employment in general works. And even if City Hall is not open to the general public from the start of the year, which who knows, it depends on the pandemic, the governor, etc. City staff, I assume, are still going to be in there just like they're in the current City Hall right now. And that still incurs a maintenance burden, janitorial and custodial burden, regardless of whether we have the public in there. It'll only increase once the public gets in there. So I agree with Councillor Van Hazinga. This is, you know, we're constantly reminded of how big an investment we've made here. And whether you think it was a good idea to begin with or not, I've always thought so, but I'm aware that some people in the city disagree. That investment has been made now. So we don't have a choice of allocate $23 million to City Hall or allocate it to something else. We have a choice between taking care of our $23 million City Hall or not doing so and allowing it to rapidly decrease in value. So given that, it strikes me as simply a non-option to not fund maintenance of the City Hall building. So I will be voting against this cut as well.
Councillor Di Natale, you have the floor.
Sorry. I believe the justification for removing the position was because the pandemic being what it is, it will lessen the need for custodial services in other facilities so that they can be moved to the 2 new facilities once they open in January. And while that logic may make a little bit of sense, we touched upon earlier about the collective bargaining hurdles and the issues running into that, but also, the first positions to get cut whenever there's a huge problem, recession, emergency, are clerical staff and custodial staff. And once those custodians are removed, we regret it almost instantly. I have had experience when I was on the school committee and in my private, my prior position with DRS, that when you take a full-time custodial person out of the mix, it is not pretty. And this person's going to be in charge of over 40,000 square feet, 2 facilities at all points of the day. And that has to be emphasized too, that this isn't going to be a 7 to 4 job. They're going to be, like on Tuesdays, they're going to be in the building all day, and then they're going to have to stay probably at sometimes until, and I'm sure it's all worked out in their contract, but they're going to have to stay until 10 o'clock at night some nights if we have long meetings. And we're going to have a lot of public meetings in that building, whether it's License Commission or Board of Health, everything, Zoning Board. And as Council Zarro would attest, Zoning Board, they'll be there till midnight. So this person is going to be doing more than 40,000 plus square feet. They're going to be spending more hours in those 2 buildings than most positions, because of the fact that a lot of public meetings are held there. So the other statements made about why it's cost effective and it makes sense is obvious. I think the reason why this is being put forward is because, well, there's not a lot they're doing now, so let's use them to start. But I mean, that would assume that I personally know what the custodial staff is doing in these other buildings. And I'm not saying that this was said, but it may get implied that they're, playing cards during the day during this pandemic. I'm sure they're being put to use. So I believe when this was discussed back in March, could the finance team correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't this position created with the facilities director back in March?
Thank you, Counselor. No, it was, the position was discussed. Don't forget, the facilities director was an ordinance when you voted on it.
Right?
Correct. And that was,
Did we fund this custodial position through free, didn't we do something with that position?
there was $30,000 back in March to begin the process to hire the facilities director. And then the second we actually, the day you took the vote, I think the following day, we started handling the pandemic right away. So
But we had to vote on funding the custodial position, right?
We moved the custodial position. It had been a contracted service and we hired an employee, correct? So there was a transfer from expenses to personal services.
But this was part of that discussion, right? That's what this person would have been moved to?
No, that was just for the Boulder Drive.
Oh, just the Boulder Drive. Okay, I was getting confused with that. All right.
Council, we provided you cost estimates during that facility director
Yes.
in March that included the custodian.
Yep. Thank you. All set.
With that, I have a motion to give leave to withdraw made by Councilor Di Natale and a second made by Councilor Schultz. We'll do this by roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Councilor Boishman,
No.
Councilor Kucher,
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale,
Yes.
Councilor Fleming,
Yes.
Councilor Green,
Yes.
Councilor Schultz,
Yes.
Councilor Squalia,
Nay.
Councilor Van Hazinga,
Yes.
Councilor Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
That is 9-2.
9-2, the motion carries. So with that, councilors, I would ask for 18120 to be amended, and I'm going to ask our city auditor to confirm that the revised amount on the general funds should now reflect $134,394,026. Is that correct, Mr. Auditor?
Yes, that's correct.
Could I have a motion to amend? To reflect
Motion
that?
to amend as stated.
Second.
Seconded.
I have a motion and second to amend 18120 as stated. Speaking on the motion, seeing none, Madam Clerk will do this by roll call vote to amend 18120.
President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Councilor Boishman,
No.
Councilor Kucher,
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale,
Yes.
Councilor Fleming,
Yes.
Councilor Green,
Yes.
Councilor Schultz,
Yes.
Councilor Squalia,
No.
Councilor Van Hazinga,
Yes.
Councilor Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
That is 9-2.
The motion carries. So we have 18120 as amended and 182 up to and including 18920 before this body.
Motion to approve all.
Second.
I have a motion to approve 18120 as amended and 182 up to and including 18920 as stated on the agenda. Speaking on the motion, we'll do this by roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Councilor Boishman.
Have no choice, yeah.
I'm sorry, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Kucher,
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale,
Yes.
Councilor Fleming,
Yes.
Councilor Green,
Yes.
Councilor Schultz,
Yes.
Councilor Squalia,
No.
Councilor Van Hazinga,
Yes.
Councilor Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
That is 10-1.
10-1 motion carries, and councilors, we will send this recommendation of the committee as a whole to the special meeting of the city council, which will immediately follow this. That will be done by unanimous consent unless there is any objection. Seeing none. And I would now ask that we entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
moved.
adjourn.
Seconded.
Motion and second to adjourn, which we'll do by unanimous consent to our viewing public. Please note, we'll be adjourning this meeting and immediately restarting a special meeting of the city council, where we will have our final vote on the budget orders. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, councilors.